let's talk about morality and politics, because one of the neat things about your book is that, part two is all about moral vision. You talk about 3 different policy areas, and it's all about moral vision, and your story is suffused with an awareness and an advocacy for a more moral world. And I really enjoyed reading it because I've spent years thinking about the role of morality in politics, right? And what I've been able to sort of figure out over time is that politics without morality is a sort of an insane notion, right? I mean, we are here because we have values, and people in this country have different values. We share a lot of values, but we have different values. And so morality needs to suffuse everything we do as public servants. But there's a downside to moral framing, which is that on the extreme, it will make us censorious. You know, if you're not quite with my moral vision, well, you're immoral. And it is sometimes, I see this all the time in DC, it's sometimes when we are really aggressive in framing things in moral terms, it makes it very hard to compromise, something that we're not known for in the Congress today, because you can compromise with a libertarian, but you can't compromise with somebody who's immoral. And so I'm really interested in, where and when morality is key and where and when we need to draw back. And immigration is interesting in this regard, right? Because no human can look at family separation. And I saw this down on the border, as you did too, where a mother is in a separate cell from their 6-year-old daughter. I mean, if that doesn't light fires of moral outrage inside of you, I'm not sure you're alive. On the other end of the spectrum, though, of course, immigration policy is immensely technical. And so questions of what is the proportion of H-1B visas versus agricultural visas, that kind of stuff doesn't really lend itself to the kind of moral clarity that family separation does. So I'd love to hear you muse, since your book is suffused with this concept of moral vision, about, where is it essential to the public policy making process? And at what point do you sort of pull back from a moral framing into a more, hey, let's close the door and get a deal done kind of way of thinking about things?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And, one of the reviewers for my book in an interview said, Congresswoman, I'm so depressed that your first section is called politics and your second section is called moral visions. Do they not go together? And I think this is the question you're asking. And I think that, for me, it is clear to me that morality is infused through everything. I don't know what you fight for if you don't know what your own values are. And we can use the term values, because I actually think that we share, regardless of whether you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat, I actually believe we share some very core human values, which is we all want the right to be respected. We want opportunity. We want to be treated with dignity and respect. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I talk to universally with Republicans in my district as well. And so I think that the thing we have to remember, Jim, is that our system is not a representative system. It has led to an unrepresentative government. Now, it's representative in the sense that there, certain 750,000 people choose you and choose me, and we call that a representative democracy. But if you look at so much of the institutionalized racism and sexism that has pervaded our system for so long, the reality is that the people who are in power, who are making decisions, have a particular perspective of what may be moral or not. And many of the details of our policy, even though it doesn't sound like it, lay the groundwork for a continuation of that racism and sexism, and so, or whatever ism it is. And so when you look at these policies, I do think it is very important to keep a North Star there. And I think about our colleague, John Lewis, who just passed away, or Elijah Cummings, who also just passed away, both of whom were so welcoming to me when I came into Congress. And I remember saying, am I fighting too hard on family separation, but also on immigration, on other things? And they both sort of took me and shook me by the shoulders and said, you keep fighting with that urgency. Because I think sometimes politics gets reduced to the lowest common denominator, the thing that is easiest to move forward most quickly. But that is not actually the thing that gets at the root causes of what is happening, that requires a much deeper analysis and fix to the solution. And so is it, do we need people to agree with us 100% on everything? Of course not, definitely not. Are there technical pieces where you can argue about how many visas here or how many people get covered for healthcare through this means versus another means? Sure, all of those things are real. But what happens is the characterizations of people, for example, the criminalization of the poor or the criminalization of immigrants that happened with welfare reform, those are detrimental to any progress moving forward. And so that's often the thing I think we have to fight about, and we don't. When we're on the floor and the Republicans want to divide us, what do? They use some MTR, motion to recommit, for people who don't follow every piece of what we do, that's focused around criminalization of immigrants, criminalization of Black people, brown people. And we are too afraid to take that on and say, you know what, go ahead. You want to talk about, criminalization? Let's talk about who these people are. We're too afraid of that 30-second ad that might come for tough districts. I mean, I understand not every district is a Democratic district like mine. But I do think that is where leadership comes in, because if we don't fix those underlying pieces of recognizing the innate worth of all human beings, then that is going to hurt us on any policy we try to put forward.